Hi everyone. So during discussion earlier today, we were going through assignment 2, part A on morphology, and we only had time to get through questions 3 through 10. So I wanted to go through questions 1 and 2 and record myself answering the questions and then uploading it to Canvas, just so that you guys have the answers. So I'll have the homework on the left-hand side, and I'm going to type out the answers on the right-hand side. So let's start with question 1. So similar to the other morphology questions we saw in discussion, here we have a language you probably haven't heard of, Chamorro, and we have a set of data, so phonetic transcriptions in Chamorro and their English translations. We have 3 sets of data, and for each there are 2 different columns. We have the root on the left-hand side, and then the derived words on the right-hand side. And generally, we're interested in seeing what kinds of patterns emerge. How do we get from the root to the derived word? So starting with number 1, what morphological process is involved in these 3 data sets? So recall from my discussion slides that there are different ways in which morphemes can be added to words. The ones on this slide are some of the major ones, although there are others, and I encourage you to go through the slides to learn more about them. But this slide will be relevant for this question. So different types of processes, prefixation, suffixation, etc. For number 1, we have ada, kano, and tuge on the left-hand side. Notice that to get the derived word on the right, we're doubling the first syllable. So the first syllable in ada is a, and we double that to get ada. The first syllable in kano is ka, and we double that to get kakano. So notice that we're placing an affix before the word. So we're doubling it, as in reduplication, and then we're prefixing it to the word. So for question 1, number 1, in the first data set, we have prefixation. Specifically, we're doubling its partial reduplication. So we're doubling the first syllable. What about number 2? So here we have the roots, atan, sanyan. We're not doubling any syllables, but note that we're adding on or jon to the end of it. Recall that suffixation was placing an affix after the word. So the answer in 2 would be suffixation. Finally, number 3. It's most obvious to see the answer to this question by looking at J and L. So for example, we have na lang and metgot, and we're doubling something. So na lang, and we're doubling la to get na la lang. Metgot, and then we're doubling go to get met gogot, and replacing it within the word. So that's an example of infixation. Okay, that was number 1. Number 2, do any changes in lexical category take place? Also recall from a discussion that by lexical category, what we mean is the grammatical category. So is it a noun, verb, or adjective, etc.? So for data set 1, on the left-hand side, we have different verbs, mimic and eat. And when we derive the word, we get the noun version. So someone who mimics, someone who eats. So for number 2, data set 1, yes, there's a change in category, and specifically we're going from a verb to a noun. What about number 2? We have verbs on the left-hand side. Look at, tell, and love, etc. And we derive them to get different adjectives. Nice to look at, tellable, lovable. So the answer would be yes. Here it's a verb to an adjective. Finally, number 3. We have adjectives on the left-hand side, but notice that we also have adjectives on the right-hand side. So hungry and very hungry are both adjectives, but very hungry is just a more extreme version of the adjective. So for number 3, the answer is no, because we're going from an adjective to an adjective. Okay. That was number 2. Let's try number 3. Formulate a general statement as to how the derived words in 1 are formed. Does the same statement apply to the derived words in 3? If not, how would you change the statement to account for the forms in 3? So let's look at number 1. I already kind of answered this earlier. So we noticed that we saw before that we were doing prefixation and partial reduplication. So for number 1, each word on the left-hand side is 2 syllables. We're doubling the first syllable, a, ka, and tu, and we're adding it to the beginning of the word. So ada to aada, and so on. So in number 1, we are doubling and prefixing the first syllable of the root to get the derived word. The next question, does the same statement apply to the derived words in 3? Let's see what would happen if we applied the rule in 1 to the data set in 3. So in 1, we're doubling the first syllable and prefixing it. For number 3, let's see if that works with na-lang. So the first syllable of na-lang would be na. So in theory, we would expect to get na-na-lang. However, that's not what we see in data set 3. Here, it's the second part that's getting doubled. La is doubled to get na-la-lang. So we can rule out the fact, so for the second question, no, the statement in 1 does not apply to the statement in 3. So there has to be a different kind of rule that accounts for the shift from the root to the derived word in part 3. This one is a little bit trickier, but it's, I think, easier to show with letters J and L. So with J and L, the root both has 2 syllables. We have na, lang, and met, got. And we're doubling the first consonant and vowel of the final syllable. So in na, lang, the final syllable is lang. The first consonant and vowel is la. And we infix that, we place that within the word to get na, la, lang. For met, got, the final syllable is got, and the first consonant and vowel is go. So we double go and place within the word, met, go, got. We can see that the same rule applies for K and M. So K is dankolo, the last syllable is lo, and since there's only a consonant and vowel, we double the entire syllable. So dankolo becomes dankololo. Bunita, the last syllable is ta, which is also a consonant vowel combination. So we just double ta to get bunitata. So the answer for the second part of question 3. So for part 3, no, the statement in 1 does not apply here. To get the derived word, we double and infix the first consonant and vowel of the final syllable. Finally, number 4. Does the affix in 2 have more than one allomorph? If so, what are the allomorphs? What is their distribution? So recall from talking about allomorphs that I said that allomorphs were the counterpart of allophones from last week. That specifically they're members of the same morpheme that are predictable from the surrounding context. The way that we understood the surrounding context was the adjacent sounds to the morpheme. So for example, we observed with the English past tense that there were 3 different allomorphs, t, d, and ud, and they were all associated with particular environments. So the allomorph t can only go after verbs that end in a voiceless consonant except for t, and so on. So we want to do the same thing, apply the same sort of logic for this question. So for number 4, even though the transformation from the root to the derived word is always going from some verb to an adjective, we can see that what's being suffixed to the end of the root changes based on which word it is. So for atan, we add on. Same for sanyan. Sanyanon. But then look at number 5. We have guaya, and we add yon. Guaya yon. So there are two kind of versions here. On and yon are the two different suffixes. G, we have tulaika, goes to tulaika yon. Again, yon is there. Chalek, chalekon. Ingangas, ingangason. So we can see that for the first question in 4, does the affix in 2 have more than one allomorph? Yes, there is more than one allomorph. Specifically, there are 2 allomorphs, 2 versions of this suffix, on and yon. And I place this dash here to indicate that it's a suffix. So what is a distribution? So the distribution, what we mean by that is the phonological environment associated with the allomorphs. Basically, what feature the adjacent consonant has. So for the past tense suffixes, we saw that for t, it was verbs ending in it was a voiceless consonant. That's what triggers the use of t as the past tense suffix. So here, let's take a look at the final consonants of the roots and see if there are any patterns that we can observe. So I'll write them down on the right-hand side. So when we use on, the final consonants we see are N in letter D, N again in letter E, K in letter H, and S in letter I. Then F and G are the only ones that use this yon marker, and they both end in A. So one answer to this question would be, and we don't have that much data, so it's hard to make a definitive rule now, but we can at least conclude that a possibility is that the allomorph on is used whenever the root ends in a consonant. The allomorph yon is used whenever the root ends in a vowel. So basically when it asks for the distribution of an allomorph, you want to kind of see where the 2 allomorphs occur, what the adjacent consonant is and what their properties are, and kind of note some kind of key basic difference between where on is used and yon is used. So the difference between vowel and consonant kind of jumps out at you. So that would be the answer to the last question in number 4.